In this episode, you're going to learn a practical method for engaging your emotions instead of fighting and resisting them. You'll come away with, if you do apply this, more clarity, and you'll understand a tool that you can use for the rest of your life in any decision-making process you find yourself confronting. So, the whole premise behind this is that there are ways in which we emotionally avoid. And those two methods tend to be through judgment and defensiveness. These are mechanisms that the ego uses to avoid feeling uncomfortable feelings, or at least feelings that it's judged as uncomfortable. If you ever meet someone who's extremely critical of others, who's highly judgmental, well, there's a feeling state that they're avoiding through the judgment. The judgment becomes like the image that I'll give you is like imagine crossing a big chasm between two mountains. The judgment becomes the invisible stepping stones that gets you from one side of a mountain to another. The image I actually have is if you remember the TV show of the Road Runner and the Wile E Coyote, this like coyote that's always trying to catch this Road Runner. Well, I remember this one episode where the coyote was chasing the Road Runner who ran so quickly that he made it from one end of like a cliff to the other end, he just running quickly, whereas the coyote began to chase him, and he too was running really quickly until he looked down and saw the cliff and realized that he was not actually stepping on anything, and he fell and plummeted to the bottom. That's kind of what it's like for our experience with judgment. Judgment becomes the invisible stepping stones that the wily coyote was using to try to get to the roadrunner. But the moment we begin to let go of our judgments and simply let ourselves fall and plummet intentionally, we discover that we don't actually plummet to our deaths. We discover that our emotions aren't a big, scary thing to be avoided. They're not, in fact, they can't overwhelm us because we're so much bigger than they are. It's a simple little vibration, a little energy that happens within us. And we can simply allow it to arise and pass. And in doing so, we gain valuable insight. That's what emotions are, really. They're information. And I want to invite you to really think about your emotional landscape like a scientist would. I want you to witness them, be the witnessing presence of awareness, and allow the emotions to arise and simply become fascinated by them, become curious, as if you were studying a wild plant in the jungle in the Amazon, a new creature that you've never seen before, that you've been afraid of, but now you're growing in your curiosity toward them. And so, whether it's fear, shame, resentment, greed, it doesn't really matter. Allow whatever it is to arise and become fascinated by it, as if you were studying a poisonous plant, knowing that it can't overwhelm you, it can't actually hurt you if you abide as the aware witness that's viewing and allowing to arise whatever arises. So there are a handful of principles that can support you in this process of simply witnessing. And it's helpful to understand that our emotions are not our enemy. They're not something to fight. They contain extremely valuable insight. In fact, our intuition comes fully online when we allow ourselves to process emotions. The degree to which we resist our emotions is the degree to which we block our intuition. It's like we jam the channel of intuitive guidance. So there are a handful of principles that can support you in witnessing your emotions. The first is a willingness to be vulnerable with yourself. This is in part a willingness to let go of judging yourself. And again, if judgment is a way in which we emotionally avoid. By simply judging something, we can mask the emotions underneath the judgment. So vulnerability is really a form of letting go of judgments. Another is being non-attached to an outcome. You don't want to think of your emotions as something to get through, as something to fix. They're not things to get through. They're not things to fix because they're not, it doesn't, because you have emotions, it doesn't mean you're broken in any way. It means you're a human being, actually. So think about being non attached. You want to welcome them into your experience. And as you would sit with your daughter or with your son, you don't try to fix them if they're crying. You don't try to change them. You simply, at least not if you're a good parent, um, you simply allow them to have their experience and you are with them. You hold a space for them. So that's the type of perspective to consider taking a perspective of not being attached to an outcome. The outcome in this case being trying to get through the emotion, trying to change them or fix them. Let go of whatever attachment to an outcome you might have. Another is empathy, empathizing with yourself, empathizing with the part of you on whose behalf the emotion is arising, empathizing perhaps even with the emotion itself. I know I've had clients in which they've shown empathy toward things like fear, and they've had beautiful results come from that. I use the word result here with hesitation because the goal isn't to get a result in this instance. Perhaps a better word is they've had beautiful experiences expressing empathy toward emotions like fear. And lastly, you want to cultivate a sense of curiosity or awe or wonder, a sense of seeing these emotions like I was mentioning, like strange creatures or strange plants that flower within us. And you'll notice that the moment you drop your resistance altogether, the emotion will arise and will simultaneously dissipate. It isn't the emotion that is typically the issue, quote unquote, for people. It's the resistance that they have toward it. When we begin to layer on the resistance to our emotions, that becomes a problem. You can kind of think about, let me give you another metaphor. Like imagine two boxers inside a boxing ring. When the boxers are at a distance from each other, they they can be they can get hurt. But the moment the boxers clinch and they kind of, I'm sure if you've seen a boxing match, you'll know that boxers will clinch sometimes. And when they clinch, they can't actually hit each other. They're safe when they're really close together. That's what it's like with our emotions. When we keep them at a distance, when we are resisting them, that's where a lot of our avoidance and the secondary effects of emotional resistance starts to kick in, and that can actually hurt us in our lives. But the moment we allow ourselves to be one with our emotions, where there isn't us and them, they simply arise and there's no resistance behind their arising, then they have the opportunity to dissipate simultaneously. Again, you don't want to attach this, you don't want to make this the goal. So be aware of that subtle desire to get through it, to get over it, and so on. So it's a simple little practice. You can take 60 to 90 seconds or longer, depending on the type of emotions that are present. But simply invite an emotion you know you've been avoiding. And if you don't know, you can ask the question, what am I avoiding? Allow that to arise, locate it in your body. Ask, where in my body is this emotion present? Allow yourself to feel it. Ask what it's protecting. Again, emotions are information, and they can be extremely valuable, and they can reveal deep intuition that you can access if you're willing to allow yourself to feel.